All right, somebody, where are we at? Because I forgot to hit record. What's
I'll
the
do it.
bluff?
We're looking at spiritual warfare, Genesis 2. First issue of spiritual warfare is deception. So he's talking about deception and what that looks like, and the news media being jerks and not telling us the truth and lying to us. Not telling us truth, just framing it in a way that's not actually true.
Yeah, absolutely. And the basis of that is that man and woman are created from the same flesh and should have the same mindset, impact, and outcomes for each other. So what's causing the division? And so you have to be able, when you're going to have to sit down. Let's say, here's a scenario, legit scenario. You're in a foreign country and you know that bad stuff is happening to women and children in this area. Okay. You're going in with like four guys, except the people that have a hold of women and children, they outnumber you 100 to 1. Okay. How do you go in and take people out of those areas? Right. You're underarmed. You don't have the necessary supplies to impact that. How do you do it? How do we go get them? Fucking John
Don't get caught.
Rambo. Yeah.
Oh,
Don't get caught. Here you go. Never be there. That's how you do it. Here's how I did it. You go in and I make friends with other opposing warlords to go do my bidding for me, right? I set one side against the other. I get them to go recover what I'm needing and figure out a way for it to sweeten the deal for them and to create a favorable outcome on the other side where I can get what I need from them, right? So you got to sit down with somebody that is, for all intents and purposes, a bad guy to get him to go do bad things to other bad guys that have what I need, right? This is it
mhm.
101. And so, how is some of the ways that you create this? Well, if I'm running the news and I want everybody to know about Tom Smith killed his wife, right, on Saturday, and I say Tom Smith killed his wife on Saturday, everybody's conclusion is like some people will believe that on its face, others will question that. So, the best way to avoid people from questioning that is you don't say Tom Smith killed his wife on Saturday. What you say is Janet Smith went missing on Friday, last seen at her house with Tom Smith. Tom Smith was found Saturday with another woman in the car, and so and so's vehicle burned on the side and a body inside. You don't say Tom Smith did it. What does everybody conclude?
Automatically assume at that point Tom Smith did it.
For sure. Why? Because we threw a motive
This is
in
how
there.
you set it up.
Right? Bingo. So when you want to deceive people, you don't tell them the answer. You give them clues, two clues that are close enough to an inference that when their mind makes the logical leap, I'm so smart, I discovered something. That's how the ego of a person's mind works,
Mhm.
right? And so if I lead them to water, then they'll probably not believe it. But if I say, man, it sure is a desert hot out here, you know, these horses are freaking gonna die. Didn't somebody say something? Did you guys know anybody that knew where a well was? Does anybody know that? And you're there with somebody and they heard the same thing you heard. They're going to be like, "Oh, I know where we can get water." And, and they lead the horse to water for you. You don't have to say, "Hey, if we go down 3rd Street, Jim said there's water down there and we can take the horses down there." It doesn't have the same buy-in when you're trying to cause deception. And so here's what I mean by that is if I'm thinking about buying a car or not, what Satan will do is he doesn't come in and say that I'm being stupid and we shouldn't buy that car. He will just say to your woman, what about this bill that popped up last month? And what about the kids are getting ready to start a new activity, right? So what does that imply to the woman when you're talking about the expense of the car?
Money's tight.
It's going to be a problem.
Yeah, it puts doubt in.
That's right. That's right. And so we have to understand that, like, at a basis level, one of the first things that gets between man and woman is satanic deception that's being sewed in that's not normally a lie. It's just two focal points that allows her to believe something that is an issue. Now, watch how this gets presented to you. You'll say, I think we should buy this car. And she'll go, I don't think that's a good idea because we have this other bill coming up. And then what do we say? We go, no, 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 that's not a problem because we have this money set aside and this is for this and I'll do this. And we start to problem solve, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And does it land? Does she hear it?
Sometimes, and then sometimes they stick to their guns.
Yeah. Sometimes they believe it, and sometimes we do exactly what Genesis 3 says, and we just rule over them. And we go, too bad, bitch, I'm buying the car. You might not say it like that, but that's the only outcome you have, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, the deception she's believing there is very rarely a in the moment conflict. It's almost always a forward projection of doubt.
Mhm.
Is that making sense? It's always some shit that's gonna happen later, right? Like, it's not very like, the 2 things that we'll generally argue with our wives are things that we've messed up the inside of the household that really is their domain. Like, I put my shoes somewhere and I'm annoying her, right? Those things, or a future outcome that she's afraid will happen, and so she wants to control the now decision to mitigate that future fear. Does that track? Okay. So, if we're gonna put this in issues, let's kind of break this down. One is there can be straight up satanic influence. And the problem with the satanic influence is what you're saying is not gonna be louder than the broadcast she's hearing. There's almost no way around it. Right? And I'm going to talk about how to deal with that last. But I want you guys to understand that there are fights that you can have with your wife where you're like, are you not listening to what I'm saying? And she's like, are you not listening to what I'm saying? And you literally cannot get on any kind of communication level. It seems like she just wants to fight with you and she thinks you just want to fight with her. You've all had this fight, and I'm telling you, it's not what you think it is. So we'll talk about solving that on the backside. The next issue we're going to see is when the nature in which we're having this argument and what it's causing. Okay. So I want you guys to see, like, more than anything, circular problem solving is where most arguments go south. Circular problem solving is where most arguments go south. Okay. And it sets up for so many future situations. Like, we all grew up in America and we have a much more short term mindset of how shit happens. Okay. Tell me what you guys have seen, like, the large amounts of Muslim populations moving to different metropolitan areas. Tell me what you guys actually know about Islam and what that means. Does anybody actually have, like, a real understanding of how Islam and what's happening there? Any guesses? What do you think is the literal call of the Quran for those situations?
All you have to do is look at the Muslim countries in the Middle East. They come in and they eradicate every other religion. That's their goal, and they
Why do you
start by
Yep.
destabilizing.
They
Uh,
hate the.
well, they think they're right and everyone else is wrong, and everybody should be Muslim. That's simple. And so, like if you look in England right now, they go out in the middle of the streets and pray on purpose so they can show their dominance. They go and turn music up to show their dominance. They're doing it in Dearborn right now. Their call of prayers going out 5 times a day. You know, if I was there, I know in the building, I'd freaking put a huge speaker system and turn up ACDC every time they did it, as loud as. Or I'd go walk and pray with them, you know, because they do need to know Jesus.
Here's what you got to understand about Islam.
Long game.
I don't disagree with the mindset that if they think this is the right religion, everybody else is wrong, that they should have that religion. I think I have the same value, right?
Yeah, of course.
I don't disagree with that at all. In fact, I tell the atheist, I tell everybody, if that's where you currently believe, I would encourage two things. One, you never stop asking yourself, can I be wrong? And if I'm right, why? If I'm wrong, why? This is one of the reasons I became a believer. I went down this exact path as somebody that wasn't a believer. So if you're not going to ask yourself, can I be wrong? And why would that be true? Then you're not really going to have a basis of belief in what you have. So no, no shame for me there. What you have to understand about Islam, and if you go study the Quran the way I've studied the Quran, and I've studied the Quran not as well as the Bible, but at least 50% as well as the Bible. Okay. Here's the Quran. The Quran specifically says that whatever Allah releases later is more superior than what he's released before, right? And so what that means is every verse that comes subsequent to a previous verse, if they're in conflict, the later abrogates the earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say, here's the deal, everybody has to clean their room by 3 o'clock, and then you have to buy energy drinks, and you have to have bug spray and play basketball, and everybody has to clean their room by 4 o'clock. Got it. You leave. What's the rule for cleaning your room? 4 o'clock. The 3 o'clock's abrogated by the later, right? So everything that comes after that is in conflict with prior abrogates the prior. There's 147 verses in the Quran. Spoke too
And you're
soon.
back.
Now I'm back.
You're back.
There's
147 verses.
147 verses in the Quran that talk about peace, right? And if you understand the product, so Muhammad comes to believe what the angel is telling him. He goes to Mecca, right? He gets tossed out of Medina. He goes to Mecca, and 147 verses, most of the Quran is talking about it's a religion of peace, that the challenge is against yourself, and it's not too dissimilar from Christianity's approach to things. And at the end of this kind of initial movement for Muhammad, they have a very low number of followers, right? I don't have the numbers, but it's like less than 10,000. It's a low number, right? We can look it up. Then what happens is Muhammad gets revealed from the angel to go back to Medina. And there are two verses that come later in the Quran that completely abrogate the 147. And that is, now Allah has called you by will, force, whatever it calls for. You are not a true Muslim unless you don't force conversion, right? So he goes from Mecca to Medina. And in the travel to Medina is when the warlording starts. And they murder an insane amount of people. And he goes from like 10,000 to over 100,000 followers in the change of approach, right? And so, some key verses from the Quran, we can actually do an entire study on this, but key verses are that you cannot be a Muslim unless you subjugate non Muslims to choose Islam or pay a tax of humiliation. And the way they paid this tax is if I'm a Christian and I don't want to convert, I pay a fee. But when I deliver this money, I have to show up and give this money like in the middle of Times Square while the man is seated and I get slapped in the face and hand over the money and then go about my way. Like this is a perpetual thing. Women don't have to pay it, kids don't have to pay it, only men.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if I won't take one of those two options, then I'm called to be killed. The reason that they haven't completely started murdering people in Chicago is there's another verse in the Quran that says that you can stand by on the jihad if your numbers are not sufficient enough yet to begin the war, but you have to take the jihad and take the land you're in. It is like when I say that in Christianity, if you don't believe in Christ, you're not a Christian. That's an accurate statement. In Islam, if you don't jihad and spread Allah's religion, you're not a Muslim. It's the same as in Christ. Does that make sense? So they can't, there is no such thing as like a peace loving Islam. It's not a thing, right? It's not possible. And so why do I bring all that up as I get back to this circular problem solving is you you have to understand that the way that we're approaching problems often is that we're failing to think about this like in a long term how this deception works in long term situations that the fight you're having today Satan is setting up for a much bigger problem down the line. Okay. So, like your next fight you're having, you think it's just about that. But Satan just wants you to fuck this situation up so that when he gets enough breadcrumbs of contention between you and your wife, he can take the city the same way as the tactics we see in Islam, right? Because, like, I get it. It's not a popular thing to say, but I will tell you this. I'm 100% certain that Islam is the seeding of Satan, right? It's as the Bible says, anybody who does not confess that Christ is who he is opposed to Christ and from Satan, right? And what does Islam do? It releases the news in the same way. Jesus is from God, just not this,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, they don't
It's a
believe in the resurrection, and
That's right. And here's another one for you guys as Christians as we, last little aside here is when it says that if your enemy slaps you on the right cheek or on the left cheek, turn the right cheek. I have a thing on Instagram talking about this, but the difference between a left-handed and right-handed person, right? The reason that we're seeing this is there is a hitting of your weak hand versus the strong hand, right?
Mhm.
Some people say that there was a backhand first on the left side, presenting on the right side is the strong hand. And like if I'm going to punch somebody, everybody that you see on the street, when I see somebody that has a black eye on their left side, I'm like, they got in a fist fight. When I see somebody's got a black eye on the right side of their face, I'm like, they probably hit their face on something, right? It's kind of the same thing. Maybe they got in a fight with a left-handed person, but most people are throwing an overhand right in the regular course of a street fight of some sort. That's why you see somebody lumped up on the left, they got punched by somebody. And so the word enemy there's two words for enemy that Jesus uses. One of those is the enemy that is like best analogous to you're at work and somebody's a shithead. There's that kind of enemy, and that's who you're presenting your right cheek to. Somebody that you're not going to go smash this person. There's another verse of the use of enemy, and that is somebody came to Freeport to come kill people. I'm not called to give them my right cheek. So, like, Christianity is not called to let a violent adversary run through them. But this again is how Satan seeds deception into what believers believe, right? Here's another one for you. The leading ministers of God shouldn't have wives. Like, you don't think that that's a long-term setup to create this great dissension
Wow.
between relationships?
To create
Genesis,
homosexual
yeah,
pastors.
Genesis 2. It wasn't good for Adam to be alone. Therefore, God makes him a wife. And now we extrapolate over to nope, a man should be alone. And even when Paul says it, Paul's not a priest, just so you know. I mean, he is in the royal priesthood, but not in the colloquial sense of what we say for a priest. What Paul is a man that's full-time TDY. I didn't take my wife to Ukraine, guys, right? I didn't take her to Africa. I didn't take her to Nepal. I didn't take her to Afghanistan. I didn't take her to Iraq. She stayed at home where she's safe. And if I had did 20 years in GWAT, like I got guys with 12, 13 deployments, their wives don't go with them because they're in a war zone doing war shit. Paul is in a war zone doing war shit for the kingdom. It would have been highly unethical of him to take a woman with him for that. So in his case, when he says, I wish everybody could be like me, that's because the time period was a war to spread the gospel. We don't have that in America, right? There very much could come a time where like the world gets so crazy, I kiss my wife goodbye and won't see her for the remainder of our lives in pursuit of protecting her and my kids. That's a reality, right? So if it gets to that situation and I'm out and I run into a young man, I'm like, I advise you not to be married. But it's not because I'm advising him not to be married across the board. It's because in that situation, you're going to screw her if you do. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So, all the way back, this circular arguing, and I'm telling you this on my own failures as a husband that took me so long to understand that the way that I'm fighting with her now sets us up for future failures by how I'm dealing with this argument. Does that make sense so far? So, what is happening in the arguments? Let's break down an argument. Your wife has a problem. She's afraid about something. Can anybody give me any topic other than a car? What's a fight somebody's had? I know y'all had a fight.
Never had a fight.
Uh,
Like,
how
first
you they don't always agree. Like my wife doesn't always agree with how I discipline the children because
Perfect.
I'm harder than she is. So she
That's right.
takes a softer
That's right.
approach, and
as you should
I
do.
nip it in the bud.
That's right. So harder in discipline. That's a great one, by the way.
It is.
I had to toe this same line. In fact, John was around for this, right? When my kids were very little, and so's my dad. My dad saw it on my mom's side. In fact, my dad was able to discipline me and not so much my sister. were completely different outcomes. In fact, I remember plenty of times as we got older, my dad, in not so few terms, would say, I was able to discipline you and not your sister, right? Why wasn't he able to discipline my sister? Dad, what was the answer for that? It started well before he came along.
Well, your mom wanted to protect her and wanted to keep her life soft and make sure she had all her goodies and wouldn't let me take it away, wouldn't let me use any of her her things that she valued to get her to behave. I couldn't take away anything and then reward her back with something for good behavior, so to speak, in simple terms. I mean, nobody
Mhm.
wants to beat their kids, but sometimes you can motivate them, encourage them. You can encourage them, you can take away their currency, and then get them to behave by giving them their currency back, kind of like we earn a paycheck. You
Yeah.
behave a certain way,
So
you get a paycheck.
you create negative incentives for things you don't want and positive incentives for things you want. So then they can choose.
Yeah. What's their currency? Yeah.
Yeah, whatever
Yep.
currency you use. So you want to do that? 100 push-ups. Oh, I don't want to do 100 push-ups. Then don't freaking do that.
Right. And so was my mom just stupid? No. Where did that start? Why was she that way?
Well, I think she wanted to overcompensate for the way her mother raised her. By her mother was super hard, super strict, and in some ways she was giving. But your mother spiritually just wants everyone to kind of have everything they want, be comfy, and she's nurturing and providing and covering and trying to make everybody happy, and all that kind of stuff. And I was more like, hey, let's get this done. If you're not going to do what I say, then you're not going to get this. You do what I say, you can go get some ice cream. If you don't, then you're going to sit in the corner, and then, your mom would be like, no, 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 she gets ice cream anyway. Everybody
Yeah.
gets a trophy.
Yeah.
So,
And here's the deal. And my dad probably doesn't want to put my mom's business out there, but I don't mind it in growth here because I love my mom tremendously. But my mom was like pretty heavily abused as a kid, right? So my mom had to like endure uncommon levels of parenting, if we'll call it that. And my uncle, her brother, had almost no discipline instilled on him, her younger brother. So when she became an adult, she was overly protective of my sister being disciplined and knew her brother, who was I loved him to death, but he lived with us like most of my life because he didn't have shit figured out. Ton of fun, no discipline. So disciplining me, she didn't get in the way of because her brother didn't get disciplined and she saw what happened. She got over disciplined and oppressed at a crazy level. So she naturally was overly protective of my sister. And then to add insult to injury, as you guys know, my dad adopted me. My sister was older than me and in her mind had some kind of belief as to what my biological father was like. So he was great and Jeff was the problem. And so she even went and lived with them for a couple years. And my stepmother was a fucking sociopath, just intent on creating division. So, like, this is the shit that my dad's having to deal with is like my sister's being like greatly deceived in the time she lives with my stepmother into a belief system. So, when she does come back, she thinks my dad, who's actually the only hero in the story, is the bad guy. She's fully like caught in deception. And my mom grew up in a very rough situation. So when it came to my sister messed up, my mom's lie was, you know, I don't want her to experience what I experienced without realizing those problems that can create. Now, I don't know if there's any level of discipline my dad could have done based upon the way my stepmother was, to be honest. So this is more conjecture than anything, but we have to create a hypothetical scenario to see what this reality could be different of. But the reality was I got disciplined plenty, right? I definitely got my ass whooped. And there were like outside of discipline, there were value standards that were instilled with me that he knew he could hold standards with. Like even as a kid, I'd be working on my bike, sitting on my ass, and he'd be like, I don't think so. Get off your ass. I'm like 10, and I'm like, I guess you can't sit on your ass and be lazy while working. And it was counterintuitive to me as a child, but boy, did it set me up for success in life because it's the way I think about stuff now. You can't, comfort is not even a thing that comes through my mind. Like, I don't care if I'm uncomfortable because of the discipline that my dad gave me in the standards he taught me. And he knew he could give me these standards because he would hold me to these standards, right? Like a weekend, you think you get to sleep in on the weekend? Try again. We're going to get woke up to go do some work. We got shit to do. Let's go. Right. And I'm so grateful that he raised me the way he did. So, how did the scenario get set up to where my sister could go live with him in the first place? Well, my mom and dad both knew that my stepmother was a piece of shit, like terrible, like without getting into the whole history. One of the most diabolical people you've ever heard of. Again, my dad loved my sister and didn't want her to adopt, and these are young parents, the mindset of we don't want her to feel like she couldn't go seek out to try to live with who she feels like she's missing out on, right? Again, the whole lie was created in we want to love her and honor what she thinks is accurate. But that's Satan's long-term game plan there, right? So John got to witness this. My dad got to witness this. But when the kids were really young, Slade's on here, right? Slade, where you at? About to whoop him right now, just thinking about it. Just trying to find that camera. Yeah, we hear you, but we don't see you. Yeah, look at that neck, dude. Looks like a thumb for a neck.
Can I ask a question, Jordan?
Please.
Did you feel safe, secure, and loved by your mom?
Absolutely.
Is that a good thing?
Oh, yeah.
But she went too far.
Yeah.
She would
My
let you do
mom,
things that she would
not
let you do
me.
things that she shouldn't be doing. Not you at all?
No, no, I don't think
Okay.
so. My mom, I'm sure that my dad had to deal with like he doesn't need that level of discipline, and my dad just I was so young,
Wait
our relationship was never a question. Like my dad and I's relationship was never a question. There was never like a you're not my dad, none of that shit because
Right, of course.
he's all I ever knew from the time I mean, how old was I? A year and a half, something like that,
Yeah, you're like not even two.
Well,
right?
the reason
What
I
about
asked,
your sister? How old was your sister? Just
Two
curious.
and a half years older than me. So she was
Okay.
like,
Like
yeah,
too late.
four.
Well, you got 6 years to get them to say no to themselves, and if you don't, you're gonna have a really hard time after that, right? The first thing you teach is you do what I say, period. And if you don't, pain and suffering. Have a nice life. From about 6 to 12, you start to give them some. Why do we do that, right?
mhm.
The reason I ask, as we talk about this, we're not careful. You start to demonize women, right? She's made in God's image. You're made in God's image. You're a freaking hard ass. You do what I say, or I'll freaking kill you. Make another one look just like you. Not a problem, right? Well, when you go too far, that's not appropriate. That's why we get tyrants, and that's why we get people who are evil in our homes who beat our children and do stupid and
Mhm.
terrible things. The wife is supposed to protect your kids from you at times, but not too much. So if you're passive, I guarantee she's taking over. If you don't have a plan, if you don't have an opinion, and you don't go, babe, we're not doing that. We're not eating the stupid apple. We can go talk to God about it, but we're not doing that. Not in my house, right? And that balance is where God wants you to be, because we overlap like this. And at the extremes, she's going to be too soft and too kind, and you're going to be too mean. And actually, if you don't know, single parent women are the people who create bullies, because they don't
Right.
wrestle with their boys, they don't teach them boundaries, And then those kids grow up and beat the crap out of anybody they can because they're bigger than them. So the
Yeah,
What
balance.
about
like
this?
this.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
When, okay, so, we don't want to oversimplify this because there's a lot of things that go on in the flesh in the world. And like with Jordan's mom, she grew up in tremendous brokenness, seeing her parents beat each other. I mean, in fist fights.
Terrible, terrible.
But at the same time, she was very, very strong-willed. She developed an inner strength from having to deal with that.
Right.
I mean, she was a barrel racer, a champion barrel racer. She could control a 1,000-pound horse with her legs. So I'm got to deal with a barrel racer. When I marry her, she's got 2 kids, and I'm dealing with someone that's extremely strong mindset as a woman who's got to be not only feminine but also masculine. So she's trying to be the woman and the man, and I got to come in and say, no, I'm the man, and she's trying to control all the discipline and pretty much trying to emasculate me because she has to be in control because of her insecurities as a child. So when does the spirit get strong enough to overcome the fleshly insecurities?
Yep, that's exactly what we're going to hit on this circular problem with the solution to that. But I'll tell you, as a witness to watching you, father and husband, exceptional job. And ultimately, wisdom is known by its deeds, right?
Yep.
So, if I can say confidently, you got to parent one child, and I'm very proud of the outcome that you did with that. Like
Thank you.
when I became a man early on, I knew that what you instilled was different than what I ran into on a regular basis. Lucas, you had a question a second ago. What was it, brother?
Yeah, my question was is I was just curious the impact that it had on so that lack of discipline for your sister, just the impact on the teenage years and then adulthood, if you noticed a difference. Yeah.
Well, for starters, again, my parents didn't raise my sister.
Mm,
They had portions of raising my sister because
right.
my sister didn't live with us for multiple years. And then by the time she got to teenage years, for all intents and purposes, she ran off. Like, that's the easiest way to say it. My grandmother would be a safe haven for her, right? My grandmother absolutely sucks too. I love her, but she's terrible, right? And on my father's side, she's my biological father's mother, right? So she was a safe haven and created an easy rebellious situation. And then ultimately, my sister got pregnant when she was 17, left the house even before that. Like, I think she lived with her boyfriend. So there wasn't like the ability to actually discipline her because she had all these safe havens to not be in the house, right? Now, this is also in the 90s, and it's like, you're like, well, why don't you just make her come home? It's like it's easy to say and hard to do. Like, what are you going to do? You go into court, you broke. It's the 90s. You don't even know what your answers are. There's no Google to figure out, right? Like, how do you figure out? I don't know. Do we go to the library? Do I ask somebody I know? You know what I mean? So, like, the options of understanding were super low. She had a lot of safe havens. I'm the only person that grew up in my parents' household. So the only people that my parents raised was me, right? And so I have like I'm not an only child mindset because she was there plenty, but I am like a firstborn mindset because I was the only child that was raised in that household. So the outcome and I love her, and I'm hoping she's growing now. I'm 40, so she's 43, I think. Um, she's still doesn't have life figured out,
She's doing
right?
better. I mean, I don't know
Better for sure.
recently. You don't know. She's got a job at Home Depot.
Yep, yep.
She's working at the pro counter. Um, she's just now growing up. So if you don't have discipline as a child, it takes a lot longer to grow up. So she's in her 40s. She's just now getting it.
Yeah, she just did Thanksgiving with us here. So my parents, Jess's mom and dad, or not dad, but mom and husband, but they've been married for over a decade. He's awesome. And she came here and she did Thanksgiving and stuff with us. And I'm always very shrewd with her because I don't trust her, but she was exceptional at the house and no contention the way we would have seen 10 years ago. So like man, my heart is open to her. I'm just also going to be shrewd, and I think my dad's the same way. And I thought it was really a giant difference over that. My niece, her daughter just got married. She was exceptional there in my assessment. So a lot of growth. I think she is starting to figure out life. Really, her problem was like the person that wants amazing outcomes but doesn't want to do the hard stuff to get there. That was kind of her in a mindset for most of her life. So it was like, let me figure out a scheming way to get to the outcome I want. Who cares that's in the way type thing. That was her in a nutshell, right? And that's the exact archetype of my stepmother, right? Well, since passed, she died of an overdose
Yeah.
15 years ago,
Here's
probably.
here's the word for your sister now. She's contrite. She's
Hmm.
contrite. You know, she knows she messed up. She's actually turned her heart to God. She's not doing drugs. She drinks a gallon of water a day. She eats really well. We've took her out to lunch a couple times. She'll clean her plate. She's contrite. You know, she
Hmm.
recognizes that she's done wrong and she's trying to get back right. But I think her children inspire her, you know, because they're doing so well. Her son's moved off to Washington. I don't know if you know, Joseph's living out in Washington State
Hmm.
right now and got his own job, got his own apartment, and he's, you know, influencing his mom, her daughter, Kylie, influencing her. So she wants to please them, you know, more than she ever wanted to please us.
Right.
So the
And I
tables are
will
kind of,
say this, for all the shortcomings that I've seen in her, both her kids are pretty interestingly well adjusted. My niece did grow up for multiple years in my house. Like when I was a teenager getting ready to leave school, my niece lived with us, right? In the middle of this. And so my parents honestly raised my niece for her founding years, and you can see it. She's her she has an uncommon level of confidence and vulnerability at the same time. It's very impressive. Um, when she was younger, even my sister would joke, "I think she's your daughter, not mine," right? Like, because she's a kind of a feminine version of who I am as an adult. She's interestingly exceptional. So, pretty impressive outcomes, to be honest. So all that to say, back to this circular problem of how Satan is going to set us up for these long-term problems, and just to Chris's question on the heart and discipline is, your wife is going to project, I don't want my kids to be broken. That's the long-term fear. Okay. Now, how do we go about that conversation? Well, it often goes with us trying to say that's not what's going to happen. And they won't, by the way, your wife won't say, I don't want them to be broken in spirit. It will just be about today's argument, but that is her long-term fear, right? And why is it that they don't say what the long-term fear is? This is the circular argument. It's because we absolutely suck at giving them enough space to say what they think.
Mhm.
Okay. And this is what we have. I'm telling you, I have failed this so many times. And when I tell you that
We absolutely suck at giving our wives space to think.
Yeah, to
space
talk and wrestle through
to
things.
express, space to get to the real problem.
Yep.
Okay. So
Hmm.
it'll go something like this. Chris or Jordan will be, hey, I'm about to whoop their ass for this, right? When my kids are little, I'll tell you right now, I spanked both of them. I don't know when the last time I've had to genuinely discipline either of my kids, to be honest, because I did so much when they were little, right? I think Slade, like, Slade and I had a conversation about something that he did poorly. It's probably like 3 or 4 weeks ago. His first time, probably in like, gosh, son, I don't know when the last time he got in trouble before that. It's a long time, you know. And I pulled him aside and I said, "Hey, tell me what happened from your mindset." We talked through it. And then I told him standards and expectations. Here's the deal, dude. I understand how you got to that point. This is not this is not how we're going to operate. So like, this is your I get why you made the decision. it doesn't matter. Those decisions won't fly for these reasons. So if I see this come back up again, I'm telling you right now, and what he did was he was disrespectful to Jess, like in a moment of poor thought. And I tell him, like, dude, you might think that's your mom. It's not. That's my wife. Right.
I use
So,
that exact same thing. You will
That's
not
right.
disrespect my wife.
That's right.
Right.
Because if a man did that to my wife on the street, I'd beat him down.
Well, that's what I told him. I said, listen, if another man responded to her the way that you did there, I'm fucking him up. And I'm telling you, if you talk to her like that, I'm going to beat your ass. Right. I'm going to beat you like a man. And that might seem drastic to somebody else, but he needs to understand if you treat a woman like that and she has a man, there will be problems. Now, granted, when I say treat a woman like that, he like got pissed for a half a second and was like, I don't remember exactly what he said. Do you remember what you said? He was trying to do something for school. My sister and wife were like poking him a little bit. They were having fun. He didn't have fun with it at all. And he was like, I'm trying to finish this or something, right? Something aggressive. And I was like, we're not doing that. You understand? And he got it, right? Did you understand, son? Yeah. And so that he knows I'm not playing because of the discipline he had when he was young. That if you hit these lines, these are these outcomes. And when we go to have these conversations with our wives, what will happen is the kid was anybody got Alex, you got young kids. What's something one of the young boys have done recently that's shitty? Young kids they have more opportunities for examples here. Alex,
Checked out.
there we go. Alex, what's a young thing that Chris is not Chris that Cruz has done did we drop him just now? We dropped him. All right, John, you're up. What's something one of the boys have done?
Oh man, pick one. They're like right now, Trip. Like like they're wrestling and stuff on the mat. So like right now, I'm teaching Trip that you don't sucker punch right after you give a hug of goodbye. So he'll be him and Brax will go at it, and then they'll do like a respectful hug, and then Trip will just sock him in the face right after he gives him a hug. And I'm like I'm trying to get that through to him that you don't do that.
Yeah, so there's a great one. So you can't punch right after you say that we're cool, right? That's a generally accepted answer.
Right.
But it's also a very fleshful response from a young man. Like it makes sense. Like, hey, you wronged me. I still feel disrespected. You're getting these hands. So the pattern there is John goes no and goes, I'm going to go discipline the kids. I'm saying you have to spank your kids. I'm not telling you what you have to do, but they have to know that that's not acceptable in some way, shape, or form. And that's going to have some kind of response that's probably going to make her feel like I don't want him to feel broken because their job is to help instill confidence in kids. That's what a woman naturally does is makes highly confident kids. And they do it through love because when we're loved and accepted, we are confident. Like as a man, I feel very confident in the world because if I have my wife's approval, I don't care what other people think. If I don't have my wife's approval, then I do not have the same confidence. And this is our side of the circular argument. I think I should do this. She's giving me lack of approval. So now I'm somewhat insecure in this argument. She doesn't want this to lead to broken kids. And so when she says, I think you're being too aggressive, I immediately shut that down with, no, I'm not because of the XYZ. And then she says something and I say something. And what's happening ultimately is I'm insecure in what she's saying to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't want to hear what she has to say because if in my heart I know that I listen to that fear and I'm afraid to stand in that gap, then I know that that will actually lead to wicked sons.
Yep.
So I'm trying to cut it off at the pass. she has a different fear. And now we start to do this. And however this argument plays out, it matters for the next argument.
Mm-hmm.
And it matters for the next argument
Mm-hmm.
until there's enough Muslims in your city for Satan
That
to
they
create
take over.
a great division between you.
Correct.
And now she's not my wife, she's my adversary. And this other woman is not. This other man is not. This picture of a life where I'm not fighting with her all the time is not. This picture of a life where it would be better for her to not be fighting with you all the time. I'd rather us be separated is not. These are all the deceptions that play out based upon every one of these arguments, right? Is that tracking so far? Does that make sense? So, what's taken me so many years to understand this spiritual warfare is Satan's not in it for this argument.
No, he's playing a
He's
long con.
in it to he doesn't have to win a division in this argument. He has to cause a 1% division.
Yep.
And then the next argument, a 1% division. And you think like 1%? Check it out. There's 52 weeks in a year, right? Let's say, how many times early are you getting into an epic fight? Probably not every day, maybe every other week for a while. There's a 25% division. And then if you even separate it out to a month, then it takes 2 years and you're at 50%. And then you don't even want to fight about it anymore. So you don't have the same arguments and you get to create these small divisions. And now all of a sudden, a couple that had been married for 5 to 10 years are completely divided as adversaries and no longer one flesh. And then you get a 10-year divorce and people go, what happened? And in the 10 years, you have substantially more positive interactions, but the division grows to the point that all of a sudden you have this one fight, and now it's enough to split up because of all of these previous circular arguments.
There's a good example. If you think about that, when you got married, you took a log chain and tied it between your tractor and their tractor. If you keep correcting to the same goal, you're perfectly fine for the rest of your life. You can do all kinds of work. It's amazing. If you're off a degree, eventually you're going to start to pull apart. And as tension happens, you're going to pull apart. Eventually you end up opposite, destroying the ground you're supposed to be producing. You know, and as to your point too, Jordan, your wife is, her primary job as Eve, as the Holy, like the Holy Spirit, is to provide identity, security, that I'm loved no matter what. That's what she's doing for God, to represent God to your children. But you have to tell them that no. It does matter what you do. If you do stupid stuff, it's going to hurt. If you do good stuff, it's not going to hurt. And you guys have to come to an agreement. And then when you have these conflicts, one of the things I've done with, I think it's been helpful, is, hey babe, okay, don't ever disagree with me in public. I won't either, or in front of the kids ever. But in private, let's go talk about this. Even if I'm screwing this up by the number, if it's not life, limb, or I, we're going to do this. That's the only time you can stop me. But in private, so if we let him do this, what is the natural long-term outcome? Do we want to incentivize that outcome, or do we want to incentivize a different outcome? And that could be a 4-hour conversation while you're helping her understand what she can't see, and she's helping you see what you can't see. Because he puts you together for a purpose, to conquer the world, not fight against each other. But there is going to be always some tension, because she's going to, her natural desires are going to have to be checked, and your natural desires have to be checked.
Yep. And so for me, I give all of that before this to just give the way that I finally come to understand how this argument is supposed to go after years of failing at this. And one last question I have before that is, and this what it might just be true for me, but I'm inferring and assuming that it's not. If you have some bills that need to be paid and currently don't have money to pay it, there's some stress for that. If you have somebody you're dealing with at work, there's some stress for that. How does that stress compare to you feeling like your wife is highly living in anxiety? If you feel like your wife is like in this tumultuous, downtrodden feeling, which of those two stressors is greater?
Your
Uh,
wife living in anxiety, 100%.
Right? This is what I've come to realize for me. And it took me a long time. And this is literally what I told Jess. I said, I want you to understand my greatest fear is that you won't trust me. And so I don't want you to live in a space where I see that you're like, I have a hard time seeing you anxious. I'm okay with whatever the fucking problem is. I really am. The only thing that really dents me is when I know I can't get you to stop being afraid of what's happening. And that scares me. So for me, when I see you start to say stuff and project what you believe is going to happen that I know is not going to happen, I try to come in and cut that off at the pass so you don't believe that because I don't want to see you in that kind of stress because whatever's going to happen, I'll figure it out. I'll find a way to deal with the problem. But what I can't deal with is knowing that you're living in this ultra stress scenario. And my wife says, well, it's not working and it doesn't help. And I'm like, I'm not sure what to say. I don't know. I don't know how to deal with that. Like, if you're saying something, my great fear is that you'll believe what you're saying. So, how do I deal with that? Right. And this was a long kind of form conversation that we had. And what she educated me on, which is like, and I just trusted her. And I was like, I don't believe that's going to work. That's what I thought in my head. But if I'm going to ask her to be faithful in spite of what she believes, I probably should practice some myself. And in a nutshell, this is the way your argument should actually go is that she sees this problem and she starts telling you why this and this and this is going to happen and this is a problem. And you don't have to tell her why it's not. You you have to understand that the way she's going to de-stress is by downloading all of the things that have her stressed to you. She'll tell you this and this is going to happen, but then this and this, and you're in your mind like, that's not going to happen. I don't want her to believe this. If she believes this, she's going to be anxious. And what I'm telling you is, you need to take all that shit in, all of it. And she's like this, and you're like, okay, why do you think that? Okay, this. Okay, well, what do you? Okay, got it. And it needs to be a very long you listening and letting her say shit that you think is going to cause her long-term anxiety. And when she gets all of that out, in a nutshell, this is how I answer that. Okay, so you're thinking this, 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 this. Yes, listen, all of what you're saying makes sense to me on why you feel that way. What I'm saying is, I'm asking you to not project what's going to happen. I'm telling you that here's the problem. I will find a way to deal with the problem. And if the problem changes tomorrow, I'll find a way to deal with that problem. I understand I can't make you not feel anxious. I'm just telling you, I'm not. I'm not afraid of that problem. And even if we get done talking and you genuinely believe that's going to happen, I'm not worried about tomorrow, as Christ says. I'm going to deal with the problem here. And I'm grateful that you were willing to tell me that. I'm not afraid. I love you and I'm here for you. I'll scratch your back, massage your neck, whatever it is, but I'm not concerned about that. It's going to be all right. And I'm asking you to trust that I will find a way to deal with the problem And if everything that you think happened happens, then I'll figure out how to deal with the next step when we get there. But I'm not afraid, right? And just simply casting that I don't have to take my wife's anxiety away by telling her the truth, because it does not work. The only thing that, and I have watched this, my wife was tremendously anxious about something not long ago. And I'm like, there's no way she's going to snap out of this unless she believes the truth. And we had a long form conversation on this. And my answer was exactly what I just said to y'all. And lo and behold, she wakes up the next day and she's great. And I'm like, that don't make any fucking sense to me because I don't
Right.
operate like
Crazy.
Mhm.
that, right?
Yeah,
It's
I have to say that Jordan, like that, the conversation that we had that morning,
right.
like I realized, like, and now it's I come home, what's wrong? And I sit there and I listen because I realize that sometimes, being a cop, I bring my stress home, which more stresses my wife out,
Yep.
Right.
and I wasn't even
Right.
realizing it. And I think as husbands, we do that sometimes. We unload our stress and forget about our wife's stress.
Correct.
Right.
You should unload that with men and then provide your wife a safe place. If you want to see this play out, you can see it in John 14, 15, 16, and 17. Jesus has served his men, told them and shown them that you don't have to be afraid, but they're terrified. He's going to, he keeps telling them, I'm going to die tomorrow. And they're like freaked out. And so he just helps them talk through this issue, right? And when you get to a conflict, the better you have trained your wife that I'm not in this for me. I'm not just worried about myself. I'm not trying to get my own. I'm in this for us. Every action I do is for our family, so our family can do well. And I do what I say. If I said I'll pay the electric bill, I freaking pay the electric bill. If I say I'm going to go to church, I freaking go to church, right? And the more you can be the man you're supposed to be, let your yes be yes and your no be no, and you serve your wife. You're not at the top of the tier. You're the chief servant. You'll provide security. So when these conversations come up, because they're coming up, because Satan is trying everything he can to destroy your marriage and your family, you'll be better. And once you realize too, most women are emotional, right? Emotions are good,
Yeah.
but they just indicate something. No, it's good, right? It's good that they are. I like that my wife's emotional. It's fantastic because I got one emotion, and if you step on it, it hurts my feelings, right? But otherwise, I
Yeah.
could freaking care less how you feel. But like a balloon, as they get anxious, that emotions just keep building, and you've got to provide a place where you can allow them to vent so that they can let air out of that balloon. So the balloon goes back to normal, everything's great. And if you don't do that, what will happen is they'll get super emotional, super freaked out, and the more you serve yourself and try to push hard on it, you'll just pop the balloon and everything goes to hell in a handbasket, just like that. So you
Yeah. And
have to provide security.
that's it. And what I would remind you guys is when you're not letting her voice her anxiety, I don't think you're being selfish. And you're not being selfish. What you're trying to do is protect her from that anxiety
Correct.
because you do want to serve her. And so the problem is in your heart, you're like, I'm trying to take care of her. I'm being selfless to her. And I agree, you are. But the tactic is not the one she needs. And
Hmm.
so if we're talking about disciplining our kids, this is the beauty of letting her actually tell you everything that she's stressed about is she'll probably say something that will actually be helpful to how you're going to address the problem
Mhm.
because there's two things happening here. You're not stressed about the problem. You're stressed about how she's going to feel. That's one issue. The other is the problem that you guys are having contention over. These are two different issues. And so if you're not careful, you'll let Satan tell you, if she weren't this way, I could just solve these problems. She's the problem, right? So what you need to understand is for every issue, there are two things happening, and you're trying to serve her in both. And guess what? She is trying to serve you from her perspective
Mhm.
in this problem. This one, she's less concerned about. But the problem is that if I don't let her voice what she has, then in the next argument, she's even less likely to do so. And in the subsequent arguments, even until she never actually brings anything up when you're dealing with an issue. And then she's bitter towards you. And then it grows. So we have to think long term is the way that Satan divides. Judas did not go to the Pharisees in the first year. That was a long term outcome, 3 years to get Judas to that point. So when there's something that pops up, you need to know there are two problems in front of you. One is that you think you have to solve her anxiety by telling her how you're going to do it. John, your audio went crazy, so I muted you. I think I can allow you to.
I don't know what I did.
Yeah, yeah, no
Oh.
worries. Is it you again? Yeah, there you go, John. John, you're like in the middle of a hurricane every time you unmute. So the two issues, every argument, I want you to understand that I want to solve my wife's anxiety. Here's the promise. I cannot do that by showing her how I'm going to deal with the problem and why it's not a problem. That does not work. The way that I deal with my wife's anxiety is by making sure I fully allow her to unload what's causing her stress like an advisor to the problem. I do this with my men, and that's what I realize. I don't do this with my wife. I will call in my guys. Mike, the guys in the unit know that Mike and I's personality could not be any different. So my command sergeant major, him and I sit together in command. We could not be any different. And I go with Mike. I go, Mike, I think we need to buy 6 cars, hypothetical. Mike, what do you hate about that? And I let Mike tell me everything that if he were a woman would be what causes him anxiety about that. And sometimes Mike will give me it. He'd be like, I'd be like, you know what? You're right. 5 cars and a motorcycle is probably better. Or, okay, I understand. It makes sense, bro. Here's the decision I'm going to make. And if I'm wrong,
We'll
address
adjust.
it. We'll adjust. And that's how you have to deal with your wife. I'm not going to ignore what her stuff is. I'm genuinely listening because I might not have all of the answers. If I don't listen to her on disciplining the kids, then maybe I literally beat them. So I need to take in what she's saying. I don't want them to be insecure. I don't want this. And my job's not to go, okay, that's not going to happen. My job is to go, okay, well, how come? All right. Okay, I
What
love
else?
you. What you're saying makes a lot of sense to me. I am going to account for that. I'm going to go deal with disciplining them. I'm asking you if you can to trust that I heard what you said, and I'm going to put the best practice here. And if I see that my approach is off, I'll adjust. Thank you for sharing that with me. It does mean a lot to me. And as I start to implement this, genuinely letting her download her stress and taking in her counsel, her wisdom that she does have, because if she doesn't, well, that says something about Adam, who she was taken from, right? She does have very valuable shit to say to me. So I need to take that in. And I do need to account for that. Otherwise, I'm just being arrogant. And know that there's nothing I can say in that argument that will make her not be anxious. That cannot happen. That's something that only she can do with God's grace after she's able to share with you what's on her mind. Otherwise, it's unvetted, unheard problems. Imagine that you're trying to tell somebody something and you're like, I didn't get to get it all out. That's what's happening. So that's our first thing that we have to approach on spiritual warfare with our wives. Second, I'll hit it super fast. The satanic influence. I would encourage you every single time you start to have an argument with your wife. And I don't know why this is. This might not be your experience. It is mine. I always feel somewhat embarrassed about doing what I'm about to tell you. and I would tell you to do it every time regardless. And that is, if we look at Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus sends out the disciples and he gives them authority to cast out demons. When somebody has authority, like I don't understand that there's two types of authority for who's below you. Chris, Russell on here, they're both faithful guys. So, in the authority I have as command with them, I don't have to cast them orders because they're faithful. I can inspire them by the way I lead and their own faithfulness. Like they want righteous orders so they can execute on what they're faithfully there to do. Does that make sense? They want to do those things, and that's the believer. If there were a guy in the unit that wasn't faithful, I would have to cast him orders that are in opposition to his desire. That's the authority that I have. Does that make sense? We have authority over demons. That's not to be confused with I'm supposed to inspire a demon to leave. No, I'm simply telling you, here's what you're going to do. Do that now. Leave. And so it sounds simple, and it is simple. But when Jess and I start getting into an argument, I literally right in front of her will say, any spirit that is not of Christ, I command you to leave this house, this argument, by the blood of Christ, by the blood of Jesus, the power of the cross. I tell you to leave now. I don't stop and pray that God will do that. Why? It's not what he says. He doesn't say. That's right. Now, there is one example where he's talking about this kind only comes out with prayer and fasting. That's a different scenario. We can break it down later. But you need to understand that if you're having an argument with your wife and you literally cannot communicate, I'm telling you, there is a demon in your presence. And you will watch this. Jess and I have had like an hour-long argument, and I finally like stopped being a bitch and would be like, any spirit that's not of God, I command you to leave this house right now in the blood of Christ. Be gone. Leave. And like 10 seconds later, she'll smirk and we'll have a conversation like two normal people. And it is nothing other than miraculous when you see it happen. So I would tell you, there is very much satanic influence often in your arguments. And I'm telling you, by the authority of Christ, tell it to leave. You don't stop and pray. You say, get the fuck out of this house now.
Correct.
Same way that I would give an order to somebody who had an adversarial approach to what they're being asked to do. I don't care what you're saying. Go get in that fucking car and go there now. Right? You don't have to talk to faithful men, but I sure as shit will if I have somebody that's adversarial. And that's what we're called for demons. What you got?
When you see this, that's what Satan does with Adam and Eve, right? What he's trying to get you to do is have your wife complain and complain and complain and complain and complain, and eventually you go, you know what, F it, you just do whatever you want. That is what we want to do in arguments, rather than talk it through, give space. You know what, F it, just do what you want, and you get to see what that happens, right? And then you see with the disciples, Jesus just says, "Hey, I'm going to go do this thing," and Peter's like, "You can't, Lord. That's evil. You can't die." And he directly says, "Get behind me, Satan." And I do think Jesus is doing to the disciples as a model of what we're supposed to do with our wives: kind, compassionate, caring. Sometimes just do what the F I said, not always. And if you haven't served and earned the right to say, "Would you just trust me?" then you're gonna be like, whatever. People who tell you, "Oh, if mom is happy, everybody's happy," that's freaking lie from the pit. Don't ever believe that that's true, because it's a lie. And God is Satan is using that to destroy your marriage.
That's it. Next steps as we go out into this week, even with what Bill just said, this is the way that I see this in my mind now. And what I would encourage you guys to do next steps wise is after my wife gets done telling me everything that's on her mind, I know she will not snap out of the anxiety she has in front of me. And I don't even I don't ask even for a verbal commitment of trusting me. I just simply say, "Hey, I love you and I understand what you're feeling. I'm confident in what I'm saying, and I hope that God will show you that you can trust me. I'm going to do this because I believe it's the right answer. I love you, and I don't want you to be anxious, but I would just ask you not to project what you think can happen down the line. You've shared with me what you see are issues, and I'm taking that into account. This is what I'm gonna do. If you can trust me, awesome, but I have to do what I believe is right to take care of you, and I love you." And then you just go do that because that will create more confidence in her than us trying to make them feel better. And so here's a guarantee. If you guys all start implementing this in your marriages, that's a problem for Satan. So you can expect sometime this week, Satan's going to test this theory with you. Okay. It's coming. I promise. I've seen it with my own marriage over and over again because all Satan needs to do is for you to not believe this is an approach that's winning for your family and you won't use it. So do not this week try to change your wife's mind. The problem one is I need to hear her full expression of stress so she can get that off her chest. And number two, you need to approach the problem with some wisdom that she gave you, but ultimately the responsibility you have. And you can ask for her to trust you, but that's her decision. You
Mhm.
still need to do what you're supposed to do.
Fact.
And if we'll do these two things, the next Saturday we'll have some probably at least a fight or two that we can talk about that went well. So I would encourage you guys to the one verse that came back to me over and over again when I failed on this, and I'm asking God for some clarity over and over again, over and over again. The verse in James that says, "Man's anger does not produce God's righteousness." There's no level of me getting pissed with my wife that will make me righteous. That's what God told me. So don't get pissed.
So don't do it.
That's right.
Well, and as a leader, there are gonna be times where you're just gonna have to say, well, I agree to disagree, but this is what I'm doing. Would you please follow? Would you trust me and follow? And then do what you know you have to do because it's on the backside of obedience that you reap rewards. That's what Hebrews says. So sometimes as a leader in your home, you're just gonna say, yes, I know you're freaked out, honey. I understand you're scared. I understand you want to eat the apple and it looks good and it's whatever. Let's go talk to God and see what he thinks. We don't want to talk to him. Well, that's the solution, right? Because I think if Adam would have went back to God or could convince her to walk away, it wouldn't have fallen. Or if he could, even if she had, he could have went to God and said, God, what do we do? And he's like, you're the priest, go fix it. But he didn't. Instead, he said, I'll do whatever you want. And I think that's the big, at the friction point, that's the problem. Is that when my wife creates tension in my marriage, I'm just going to want to say, F it. It's easier if I just say F it and you just do what you want. And that will destroy your marriage because you'll make her super insecure. Because if you say we're not going to do something and then she pushes and it moves, and then she pushes and it moves, it makes her freaking insecure beyond belief because you're
Yep.
not doing what you said.
Yep. And for me, not to oppose what Bill said, but a small thing that I've come to realize for me is I'm not going to ask her to trust me, believe me, or not be anxious in this conversation. So I will say, hey, after all that, I'm hoping that you can trust that I'm telling you that I feel confident about this, but that's not something you need to decide right now.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
But that's the summation of the conversation at the top. I'm
Exactly.
concrete, not strategic, so I just have to have these principles that I live out of.
Right.
Work better for me.
Well, that's what I realize is that that's generally what I was trying to do was in this conversation, take her anxiety away and get her to trust what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm not even doing
And I
that. I'm just saying this is what we're doing. I
Yep.
don't want to say,
Yep.
I love you, but this is what we're doing. And unless you can convince me otherwise, and you can take all the time you want, but I'm executing on this, right? And I think, remember too, just like Jordan said, this works for Jess. You cannot unilaterally apply what he thinks or what I think because you got to figure out who your wife is, figure out what motivates and encourages her, and then bring these basic principles to bear, because it is not a science, it's a freaking art form. And she's mysterious on purpose because God made her mysterious, because God is mysterious. And that's what she represents to the world. Frustrates you like crazy, but she also has this, which is a very good resource to have. Only like, because if you wanted her to be like a man, you'd be sucking dicks. Bad idea.
Yep.
Mm.
So don't
Well,
treat her
Kim
like a
is
man.
annoying, you know.
What's that?
So I think, you know, this is your problem is not to get her to trust you. That God will
Mhm.
sort through that, right? And so at the same time, hey, this is what I think is true. I'm hoping you can trust what I'm saying. If you can't, that's okay too. It doesn't change how I love you. I'm grateful you told me what you told me. This is what I'm planning on doing. That's it. And there is no resolution in that conversation. You press forward. And now here's what she knows at a minimum, the most important part long term. I can share my emotions with him. That's the fucking win, right? That's the most important part.
Fact. You know, one
All
other
right,
So
thing. Can I say one other thing? Jay, you're right.
please.
You can't convince her. You can't create security for her. You surely can make her insecure by your actions. So you can't force her to do what you want her to do, but you can make her insecure by you being a punk. And the more you
so
give in, the more insecure she becomes.
mhm.
Well, I think to your point, Bill, I think that God guaranteed that she would have security in you in Genesis 4. I think
Yeah.
it is guaranteed she will follow you, but you can make mistakes that will misalign what God
Mhm.
put on her,
Correct.
right? She
Yeah.
will follow you, but I can interact in a way that makes me think following me is her in this conversation agreeing with me. Those are
Correct.
not the
Because
same things.
they're not the same. She doesn't have to agree. I agree
That's right.
100%. And,
Yeah.
you know, as a
Yes.
man, your walk with God and how you treat your boss is probably how your wife is going to treat you. So if you are not submitted to your leadership, if you're not submitted to God, why would she ever follow you? You're a punk. Why would I have to follow a punk?
Well, she
Go
is
do your
following,
job.
right?
Yeah, she
She
is
is.
following you. No matter what you do, she's still following because that's what she's designed to do. She's doing your example. She's leading by your example, or she's following what your example was. Sorry.
Bingo.
So something that I'd actually started doing, to get the trust. So, my wife would, yes, he's got it. So, and it was before, all the mess started, and I've just continued to do it. If I come in and I come in the house and I can see she's stressed and she's anxious, we talk about it. And I'm like, all right, you go to the bedroom and chill out. I'm gonna handle it. And then I handle it right then. And it's usually with our girls. That way she gets the break and she knows that daddy's about to lay down the law
Hmm.
because she's the softer side. I'm the hammer. And then on that, that caveat on that is she's also that, hey, pull the reins back because I do have two girls and I'm trying to show them, what a man is supposed to be like because they're 12, and especially my 15-year-old, it's now she's at the point in her life where it's like, this is what a man's supposed to look like. This is how you're supposed to be treated, and this is how you conduct. So how you are saying, like the talking it through. I make sure that sometimes, like especially my 15-year-old sees us doing that, so she understands like this is what I have to look for.
Hmm.
Dad is the spiritual leader. This is what I have to look for. Like we had a conversation, me and my daughter, she calls them daddy's life lectures. Uh Sort of, she messed up the other day and mama handled it and then told me what happened. And I was going to ask y'all, when I was talking to my oldest, my 15-year-old, her name is Braylon, and she's a very hard kid, like soft heart, but she's like her daddy in some aspects. Like, she's just hard, and we're, it's trying to, I don't know. I I wanted to talk to Bill and Jordan when this is over to try to get some I get some more tools for the toolbox before on some things that I'd like to share.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
if y'all have time after this is over
Yeah,
to speak with
yeah,
y'all.
we can hang. Anybody's got to run's got to run. I would say this, that conversations are very similar to combat. And if you are in a combat sport or you're shooting guns at people, whatever it is, composure is what creates success, not aggressiveness. If I'm overly aggressive in combat, I'm jerking the trigger, I'm not on target. If I'm taking a shot in wrestling and I'm just all aggressive without composure, I make mistakes. Disciplining, talking to my wife, all of this is composure based. I know what I'm supposed to do. Me being aggressive doesn't create the outcome. So when I'm talking to my kids, the composure approach is, okay, let's address, what do you think the issue is? Here's what I'm seeing from the issue. Here's what's going to happen as an outcome A. Here's what's going to happen as an outcome B. One of the things that parents do a lot, here's a perfect example of doing this poorly, is the kid breaks a lamp and we come in and we go, did you break that lamp? You set yourself up for every failure there is, because when the kid tells you the truth and then they get punished, they learn not to tell you the truth. When they
Mhm.
lie, they get punished. They learn it doesn't matter what they say. So I just had two wrestling kids I did this with the other day. They were roughhousing in the bathroom. They got caught by the janitor. The janitor came and told us, and I walked over and I go, hey, janitor just told us that two kids were roughhousing in the bathroom. I want you to understand, no matter what you say, you're going to get disciplined for that. You have two options right now. One, you tell me the truth, and you're going to get a fair, less aggressive discipline. Two, you lie to me, and you're going to get a type of discipline that you'll never forget for the rest of your life. So I'm going to ask you to tell me the truth. There's no avoiding outcome of punishment here. Were you guys
Oh.
just wrestling around in the bathroom? And they're like, yes. Like, all right, get in the push up position. You're going to be there for 5 minutes. And just so you know, if you'd have lied to me, I would have sat here and counted out 300 burpees for both of you. And they're like, yes, sir. So they get in the push up, they get up. I tell them, listen, the most important part of what just happened was you being honest, but you need to understand, roughhousing on the mat, the same behavior, acceptable because of the context. In the bathroom, staff can't account for what's happening. Those leads to fights. Two people that aren't friends, two people that are friends, somebody gets their feelings hurt. Can't happen over there. So don't do that again. But thank you for being honest. And so what is their takeaway? Okay, we didn't get in trouble for just roughhousing. We got in trouble for roughhousing in the wrong place. And we did good on ourselves by owning that. And so when it comes to disciplining our kids, we'll do the same thing where we come in and we go, "Did you back talk your mom?" And then they're going to get disciplined regardless. I front in and tell them something's coming. You listen,
Mhm.
I want to ask you some questions. And if you lie to me, like, you're going to get disciplined right now. If you lie to me, it's going to be severe. I also want to hear the full thing of what you have to say so I can determine where we're at. You were arguing with your mom. Help me understand what your perspective was. And sometimes the discipline might just be like at times with Slade. He didn't get disciplined per se. I was like, hey, thank you for being honest with me. I'm going to put this on the tally of the ass whooping you would have gotten, understanding that if this is a repeat, you're going to get the payment of what two offenses are, not just
Mhm.
one. Okay.
Yep.
We're not going to do that again. Do you understand? Yes, sir. And then if something happens, he's going to get double what he would have had because I extended that to the second round. Right. So that's kind of how I would go about it. But I can't do that pissed. I have to have composure because there's no amount of my anger that's going to help me sort through the best way to deal with this. You know, that's what I would say. You know, if you want an anecdotal that has nothing to do with kids, hold on.